Well, thank you for coming. The primary reason I wanted to get to you, even though it's a little early in the process, earlier than we typically would come out and chat, is because I really felt it was important to have the community kind of bring it down a notch in terms of their anxiety and fear. I mean, this is the worst nightmare for any parent, that somebody might be trying to climb in through a window to get after their kids, especially a young teenage girl. And, that's the kind of situation we had found ourselves in. There were a number of cases that had happened over a period of time, but it wasn't necessarily attributable to this activity. It was somebody who was in the house, but it was unknown what they were doing and whether it was something like this. But now that we have gotten to this point, we believe that this individual was involved in 9 such intrusions into homes in Pontiac and 2 in Detroit. So with the partnership with DPD, and I'd also like to say, first and foremost, the community. On so many cases that we've had recently, including the tragic murder of the individual in his home in Rochester Hills, the community has responded and reacted to information we put out and really given us information to bring very fast closure on cases. And so as soon as we realized what we had in terms of complexity and repetitive nature, we put it out to the community and got a quick response. And so now as we stand here, we believe very much so that the suspect we have in custody is the person responsible for those cases in Pontiac and in Detroit. We believe pretty solidly. And I'd also like to thank our deputies in our Pontiac substation, our detectives, our forensic lab that do an amazing job to then put together the cases that will proceed when we hand the baton to our prosecutor to take it into the next phase. And so very proud of the work they've done. And our substation commander, Major Ewing, and his team do on a daily basis. And our mayor from Pontiac is supportive in our role to do those kinds of things and reach out to the community. Joining me is from Detroit Police Department is Commander Ryan Connor, Officer Justin Hearn, and Detective Melinda Cook. So they're involved in the cases and the processes as it relates to the city of Detroit. So as I said, we believe this individual is responsible for now up to 11 distinct home invasions. It seems, again, to be targeting young girls. The most recent one was where he had grabbed the female in her bedroom and had a knife. We believe he had a knife in at least 3 of these attacks. So the suspect is 13 years old. He's a tall 13 years old. And the parent, I would also say, has been cooperative. And that's really helpful and important as we move this process forward. I believe there will be a hearing probably about 2:30 today. And again, we'll be handing off, the case, if you will, to the prosecutor into the next phase. But I really felt it was super important to kind of let the community know, even before we got deep into the process, that they can take a breath, because we know we had some individuals out patrolling the streets on their own, and the anxiety of the communities, both in Pontiac and in Detroit, because this is, again, the worst nightmare of any parent, to have somebody try to get into the bedroom of your child. So with those kind of limited parameters of what I can answer, any questions?
Sure. 11 cases is a lot. Why didn't we hear anything until this week?
Well, again, some of them weren't necessarily attributable. It was a person had gotten in the house and gotten out. Could have been, a burglary, could have been, some kind of domestic situation. You don't necessarily know until you know. But once, there was more information that led us to then go, wait a minute, a number of these homes have a young girl in the house. Something else might be going on here. And that's when it kind of evolved, and that's when we quickly put the information out to the community.
How did you track down this 13-year-old? Because you live in the neighborhood.
Yeah, we got information from the community. That's what I'm saying. Having people being willing to either give us tips or share information, whether it's that case, as I said, with a fake utility worker, or in this case, very much made the difference. So we got information from a person that they believe this person that we had in that picture was our suspect, and in fact turned out to be so.
When you think about the fact that this is a child.
You know, tragically, we've seen children do very dangerous and violent things, scary things. You know, the moniker of a child doesn't necessarily mean they're not capable of doing something very terrible to another person, as we saw at Oxford High School.
Can you talk about, I know there was a 10-year-old girl attacked. Can you talk about the extent of her injuries and any other girls who were attacked? What types of injuries?
In terms of physical injuries, thank God we have very little, but obviously the emotional impact when you're a child in your bedroom, the most safe and secure thing at home, you know, there obviously has to be a process for them to deal with that trauma, that emotional trauma, that mental health trauma. So I think that's going to be the biggest ongoing thing. You know, I remember when I was a street police officer and I'd go to a simple burglary and people would say, I feel so violated. Imagine if you take it to the next level and you're in bed and somebody grabs you and they have a knife. Regardless of where you move, that fear is going to follow you.
How did you connect this young man to the cases in Detroit? It's not, I mean, you've got these other ones close together. These are kind of outside.
Yeah, our detectives, you know, were trying to run down different theories, and they saw and heard about that case, and they were like, huh. And it actually made their case a little more difficult at first because, you know, they were thinking it was a juvenile, and if it was a juvenile, how would they move all the way to Detroit? But we've now pieced that information together.
Can you talk about the time frame in which these all occurred? Because it's 11 times, 11 break-ins. What was the time frame?
The one goes way back, and there was no even knowledge of it. And that's the other point. Some of these weren't even necessarily reported. And so I think the one that goes way back was about 2 years.
2 years.
And then the most recent ones were, I think, going back to the summer.
Sheriff, is there any knowledge that the suspect was targeting homes with young women that he went to school with or that he was familiar with, or was it random?
No, he was targeting homes that he believed there were young girls in, we believe.
The Detroit event, two Detroit events, was one event off the top of your head, do you know, was it the January 13 one?
Yes.
Yes.
It was? Hubble and Schoolcraft?
Around that area.
Yeah, in that area.
Was that one on the night as well?
Yes.
Can you just react to that? Just a knife to a 9-year-old?
It's terrifying. I mean, again, that child has to, and I say child, 9 years old, has to deal with the trauma of being in your safe space, your bedroom, and someone comes in with a knife. I mean, any adult in this room would shudder at that thought, let alone a child. It's terrifying, which is why I'm so appreciative of the effort of our team and Detroit's team to bring this swiftly. Once everybody kind of realized this is what's going on. It's not just a house was broken into, which is bad enough, but it's a house that's probably being targeted because there's young girls there. And once that, you know, kind of coalesced, a lot of resources were thrown into it. The public was notified, and a swift conclusion is the outcome, which is what we were hoping for.
What's expected in hearing today?
I believe at 2:30, if it stays on track.
What kind of charges is young fella looking at?
That will be up to our partner across the street. Our prosecutor will ultimately determine charging decisions.
So that would involve whether this 13-year-old is being charged as an adult?
That's up to our prosecutor, what the person is charged as and what the charges are. But obviously, it's a very serious situation.
When you say the parent was cooperative, what do you mean?
Without getting into too much information, they were very willing to bring this young individual to our substation and allow our process to move forward. I think, you know, the parent, like most parents, wants to figure out what's going on with their child and what's the next steps forward, which especially if they're on a path that's very bad.
you recover the knife that was used?
We did it. Yep.
Believe to be the same knife in all, or
Yeah, I don't know. You know, we're the lab and other folks are working with different things now.
What was the actual process of, was he literally opening up bedroom windows and going in that way? And
Yeah, he was climbing, well, not necessarily just a bedroom window. He was finding access to the home somewhere with an unlocked window. Seems to be one of the most used opportunities. And that's why we encouraged, when we kind of figured out that this was bigger than just, you know, a random thing, to the community, lock your doors, be situationally aware, all of those kinds of things. Lock your windows. You know, it's not something that we like to think about, but we have to.
Is there any understanding that this 13-year-old was going to these houses and looking at them and casing them out before he committed these crimes, or was he just going to the homes and doing it in that instant?
He did have some knowledge of the homes he was going into and who would be inside.
Yeah, so obviously our detectives in the case know a lot more with some of the specific answers. So he had been, you know, obviously gaining information about potential victims in the homes.
Did he live in Pontiac or Detroit or another town?
Pontiac.
Two of the victims' mothers said that after this, their family was so traumatized, they are for sure moving. To those families, what would you like to say?
I understand. We're appreciative that, you know, another family doesn't have to go through this, and they should encourage their loved one to get help, to have a process to deal with that, to communicate that, that traumatic incident, and the whole family, quite frankly. I mean, even as a parent, if something happens to my kid under my roof, I'm going to feel very guilty. And you're the victim in this, not the guilty person. So push back the guilt if you're feeling anything, and understand you've both been victimized, the safety and sanctity of your home for you as a parent and them as a child. And, you know, I would suggest rethink moving, because this could have happened regardless of where they live. This wasn't, it happened to be this neighborhood or that neighborhood. It happened to be because they had a young girl. And so if they move to another house, they still have the young girl. That's the common theme in this particular case. So focus instead on what can they do to help themselves and their child. Anybody else? Anybody else want to say anything?
Can you say what the first indicator was that you,
What the what?
what the first indicator was that you had a suspect? Was it just lining up all these incidents and how similar they were? Did it come out of Pontiac substation? Was it Detroit? How did you guys put the dots together?
Well, our substation detectives kind of came up with a pattern that made them believe it wasn't just a burglary and it wasn't random. It was focused on a young girl being in the house. So that was a determination after examining a number of these cases, putting that linkage together. And then once that linkage was together, they shared that with me. I immediately put it out on our social media and different platforms, and then we got a quick turnaround on some information. That's where I thank the community for their participation. You know, we can't do this in a vacuum, and the help of people makes a very big difference, because usually someone knows someone. I mean, we had a case in Orion where someone was able to turn the person in that had, I believe it was a burglary, because they recognized the shoes. So, you know, the public is our best ally in trying to help keep them safe. Mr. Mayor, do you want to say something?
Well, thank you, Sheriff. I just want to emphasize that the city of Pontiac, the sheriff's office, take home invasions very, very seriously, especially when they involve attempts to accost women of any age. This is a really terrifying situation for a lot of our families in Pontiac. Obviously, people's homes are their sanctuary, and people expect and deserve to feel safe in their homes. And so this kind of incident is particularly terrifying for our residents. And I want to thank you, Sheriff Bouchard, Major Ewing, for your leadership and all the members of your team. I also, though, want to thank the Detroit Police Department for your service as well. This is a great example of intergovernmental cooperation and about how important teamwork is in solving crimes in our communities. And as the sheriff said, I really want to emphasize how important it is for people to speak up and speak out when they see criminal activity or have information that they can lead to putting an end to these kinds of criminal activities, because we wouldn't have been able to resolve this situation without the help of community members, and that is typically the case in so many incidents that occur in our community. So I want to really thank our residents for standing up, speaking out, and helping the sheriff's office solve this incident.
Did he ever take anything? Was he just going up to these young girls and putting a knife to their necks?
Yeah, not that at this point. I mean, obviously, again, we're early in the process. Typically, we'd have a lot more information once we're into a deeper phase. It's still very much under investigation. You know, we're probably going to go back and look at other things historically. Was this, you know, one of the ones? Was this connected? And I'm sure DPD is going to do the same thing. So at this point, we don't have any information that there's items or anything like that. But, you know, who knows what that will show as we dig a little deeper. Now that we have a suspect and an MO and kind of a radius where this may have occurred.
Did his parents return the baby with them have any clue what was going on?
I think they knew that he was having some challenges, but they obviously didn't know that this was an outcome of that.
Any interactions with police before this?
Not that I'm aware of with our agency. I don't know if Detroit had any, but we don't think so at this point.
And Sheriff, you may have mentioned this earlier in the press conference, but you saw the still image, is there any video that you're prepared to release?
You know, at this point, now that we've got a suspect, we probably won't release any more evidence. We'll turn that over to the prosecutor for the next phase. But we can check to see if there's anything that they would be okay with us releasing. But my guess is they're probably going to hold that for the next phase, if you will.
And just in terms of mental health for parents who are directly or even indirectly affected by this, what's the best resource for them? Would you suggest?
Well, obviously, I think Common Ground is a natural. They're a mental health resource. The Oakland County Community Mental Health Group. And we can probably get you a number before you leave of one of the better numbers or a couple of the numbers for folks to call. In Detroit, I'm sure they probably have a number that we can get you to before you all leave.
Again, like Sheriff said, Deputy said, we cannot be thankful enough for our supports from Oakland County, the substation, and the Sheriff Department here in Oakland County, as well as our community and here in Detroit, like our victims being forthcoming and having the courage to tell their story. So again, it was teamwork, and we're gonna do our best and do diligently to get these victims justice and keep the city of Detroit safe. And I'm sure Oakland County is gonna say the same thing, to keep their streets safe. And not only this individual be prosecuted, but as well as get services he may need so that he can have a better life.
That's it. Thank you.